Good evening. How are you? I'm doing a stand-in talk in part because the weather was so terrible today. The Jefferson report would be that it was more than 100 degrees at 2:40 today. And so I had some comments I wanted to share with you about the interview that Joseph Biden had with George Stephanopoulos on ABC. Now, like most of you, I followed George Stephanopoulos for some time. I knew him when he was in the Clinton administration. I didn't know him personally. And he's very capable, and he always wanted to do what he's doing, and for that I celebrate. But he, somewhat unfairly, 3 years ago, was criticized for how he interviewed Biden about 3 years ago, and they thought he was too soft. So there was a little pressure on George to bear down on Biden. Now, I think he did a great job in the sense that I didn't think he overreached. A couple of times he was slightly defensive, but it was a very good interview. Now, the flip side of that is Biden. Biden, by any account, by any fair account, looked present, alert, understandable, healthy, although he still had a rasp in his voice, and was responsive to each of the questions. And in a way, I thought again, and maybe it's just me, but I thought again, he kind of rose to the occasion when George pressed him a little bit. And I think that's a good thing. I find that in myself. And so maybe I just see it in him because I project it. But I thought he does better when he's asked a question like, are you going to stay in it? Absolutely. What if they came to you? That's not going to happen. What happened? I just had a very bad night. It was all me. I thought I could do it. I was wrong. He didn't review or look at least that's what I got out of the interview, the debate that brought him to this point of appearing with and talking to George Stephanopoulos. Now, among the criticisms are he seemed lost. Well, he certainly wasn't lost tonight. He was responsive. That was important. He didn't have a teleprompter to use on, which has been what some have talked about. They asked him what he thought about others talking about replacing him and so forth. And he said very clearly that he was the most qualified in terms of, I think, the context of where we are to defeat Trump. I agree with him. And I have nothing against any of the individuals that are spoken as worthy to be presidential or vice presidential candidates. But I will say this. Our vice president has been quite loyal to Biden at every step of the way when people pressed him. And it seems to me that, like the best presidents before, she's been given a role to be active instead of just being standby collateral insurance. I think that's important. That says something about Biden as well. Now, her negatives in the polls have gone up since people started talking about her as a possible successor to Biden. They don't break it down into little chapters. I don't know how long-standing it is. But she does not have the visibility of the president. She does not have the support of the president. In this sense, it's not transferable. I don't mean he wouldn't support her if it ever came to a point in which he willingly stepped aside. But that's not going to happen unless and until he discovers, in some sense or other, that he is ill and cannot go on. And judging by his presence tonight, I don't think he's ready to step aside. I think he's in the fight from now until the end. And I think he's right that he's the only qualified candidate, because if we were to put Harris in this position by any means, I think that the problem would become those who think someone else should be the president or the presidential candidate, if not her. I don't know what her thinking is on the subject, and that's good. That means she has not been playing both sides of the street, which is always a great temptation for any ambitious person, particularly in politics. In fact, her loyalty suggests to me, and the speeches that she's given suggest to me, that as an individual, a person, not as a political machination, she supports Biden. So what are we to do with the rest of the people? Well, Mark Warner, who is one of the senators from Virginia, is apparently putting together some senators, apparently, I guess, to go to Biden and say why he should not continue and he should step down. I disagree with Mark as much as I've liked him over the years, and I've supported him in campaigns. And I think he's having a bad night. He's making a choice that is wrong. They don't know something you and I don't know. That is to say, they don't know of some disease or sickness or illness or something else that rebuts the testimony or statement that Biden gave this evening, that this was an episode. This was not a scenario of ongoing ill health. This was an episode. He was tired, he shouldn't have done it, and so forth. Now, we have already had reactions from people, and it's very interesting that someone would come and tell us what we just saw as if we couldn't understand it. Isn't that something? In the chaos, it seems to me, Mark Warner and others serve the Republican playbook in reacting a little bit like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, because their conception of how to go forward does not jive with what is the best way to go forward. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, that's what Rudyard Kipling said. Well, Biden has kept his head, but those who are critical, and it's a handful, they have not kept their head. They have not analyzed, as a chessman might, looking down the board and seeing what are the moves after Biden steps aside. The vacuum political is created. Historians have already said no one has ever changed horses in midstream on the way to a presidential election who has survived. So this is our challenge. Our challenge is to go forward and support Biden. I say unless and until something else shows up, I don't think anything else will show up. But if it does, then we deal with it. We don't create an emergency that we then solve. I don't know. I sometimes tell people I'm an amateur hypochondriac. I think some of these people are amateur politicians. If you don't have the stomach for the business, if you don't have the fire in the belly, if you don't have the certainty that you can go forward and run for office, you got no business in this game. And this is a serious game. This game determines life and death, the quality of life. The standard of civilization is how we treat our own, and that is what government is about. And that is not what Trump is about. So when you hear people on the air try to tell you what you saw, remember what you saw. Remember what you saw with your own two eyes and what you felt and how it compared not only to Biden's conversation with George 3 years ago, but also with the evening of the debate, which was his bad night. I think we should get on with the campaign. We've wasted enough time, a week. Congress is back this week. I suppose we'll still have fencing going back and forth. I think Joe should hold that line. I think he's our candidate. I think he will win again if we don't get in the way and if we support his back instead of sniping and criticizing and sniveling about whether or not he can do it, talking about the future as if they know something that none of us know. So maybe tomorrow the weather won't be so terrible and I'll be out and have an opportunity to talk to you then. So thanks for listening to me. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.